Okay, folks. Thank you for being here. Thank you for being on time. Thank you to those folks on Zoom. We're going to go ahead and get started. And what we're going to do, lunch is a little bit late, but so I think whenever it gets here, we'll just kind of pause for a moment. We'll let our sponsor speak for a few minutes, and then we'll come back to the presentation. But appreciate everyone being here, and I just want to quickly thank Laura Gourlay. Am I saying that right? Yeah. Okay. And do a quick bio for her. She is a state certified general appraiser, holding the MAI, AIGRS, and CDA designations. She has been an appraiser since 2010, and after an 18-year career in the banking industry, she now works for the North Carolina Department of Transportation and has her own firm that provides commercial appraisal services to banks, attorneys, CPAs, realtors, and individuals. She's a Nashville native and graduate of the University of Georgia, and she has 5 children. Likes obstacle course racing. Very fun. And spending time doing home and yard improvement projects. I'm with you on that one. Yes. With her husband, Craig. Cool. Well, thank you so much, Laura. We'll let you take it away.
You mean you're not going to come on my next obstacle race?
Give me, I need to build up to that. I need to jog first.
Probably someone up here.
Huh?
Someone up here.
Yeah, we could probably figure it out in here somehow.
Everyone sends a really good waiver.
Yeah, you need a good waiver for that. All right, so like you asked, we're going to talk about capitalization rates today. Shortened down cap rates, that's what everybody says. And just for a broad overview, the capitalization rate is the most popular measure through which real estate investments are assessed for their profitability and return potential. Mainly commercial. Obviously, I know some people in here probably are, I don't know how, residential only, commercial only, both? Residential. Sure. Okay, so true commercial. Okay. So obviously, you're not going to see a lot of cap rate data on residential stuff, even residential single rentals. You might see it on a portfolio of somebody has 5 houses all built together that they're renting kind of thing. But it's more common to be on multifamily and commercial properties that people really calculate those rates and use them. So I'm going to start with like a real basic overview, and then y'all speed me up, slow me down as to what you think. But so the first thing we're talking about, how do you calculate a cap rate? So your net operating income of the property divided by the value, the sales price, the listing price, whatever thing you're using to calculate a cap rate with is going to get you your cap rate. And if you take any kind of courses on income valuations of properties, you're going to learn about IRV. And IRV is an acronym for income, rate, and value. And so sort of the relationships are your value of your property equals the income divided by the rate. Your income on the property should be the value times the rate. And then the rate is going to be, as we talked already, about income value. So I just did some quick math right there so you guys could see it. We've got a $2 million property. It's giving $120,000 of net operating income, and we've done a 6% cap rate on it for the example. So we're going to dig into that a little further. The 3 pieces of IRV, income, we're going to go into this. I'm going to go into more detail on this one in just a minute, but it's the stabilized net operating income for the most current annual period. So you're looking at it on an annual basis, and it is, again, your net income to the property, not your gross income. Value, I talked about a little earlier. So a lot of times you're going to see it based on the actual closed sales price. If you see a cap rate listed on CoStar or MLS or something like that on a closing, and it's going to say, the actual cap rate was, 6.45%. Also, some of those services list a pro forma cap rate, which is kind of what you as an agent are saying, the listing price based on the potential or the expected net operating income is going to be X, and that's going to be a pro forma cap rate, not an actual cap rate. So actual is going to be your actual sales price divided by your actual income. Pro forma is more like what you're listing it for from what you think the income's going to be. So those can get, people can stretch those a little bit. And we're going to talk more about ways to sort of figure that out. And then, as I said earlier, the rate is the methodology to turn that single year's income into a value. I'll show you some examples later, but minor differences in your rate can make a pretty big swing in your value. So if you have your net income divided by a 10% cap rate or a 6% cap rate, that's a pretty big jump in what your overall value is going to be. And then just to sort of get it right in your head, because this throws people off when they're talking about cap rates all the time, is that lower cap rates result in higher values, and higher cap rates result in lower values. So it's just sort of, sometimes you can get turned around in your head about that. So our next little section is, how do we get to that net operating income number? Because that is the really important number to have to be able to figure out a cap rate. So you start with your potential gross income, and I've got an example that you're going to see in a minute, but your potential gross income, which is basically all the income you're getting, whether it be just rental income or if there's some sorts of other income. If you were doing like a short-term rental, and
Let me just hide this really quick for you, if you don't mind.
no, I can see it. People can see the bottom of it. And let's say maybe they sort of have other ways that they add income into the property. They may be including that in the income numbers they're giving you, and you've got to make the decision on whether you think that that is real estate income or kind of business operating income. But so once you have your gross potential income, you're going to figure out what your effective gross income is, and your effective gross income is your potential gross income less your vacancy rate and your collection losses. So this is going to account for any unoccupied space in the property, any turnover, or any non-payment of rents. So you have to think that if you have this building right here and you moved out tomorrow, the new tenant's not moving in that same day. It's very rare in all properties that the date someone leaves is the date that the next income starts. So that turnover vacancy rate that you're going to see calculated when people are doing income calculations, it doesn't necessarily mean that the property, if you do, let's say, a 5% vacancy rate, it doesn't mean that you think it's going to be vacant 5% of the time. It means that you're building in that time frame for it to turn over to a new tenant, because like I said, there's a gap in that. And then of course, if you're talking about like large apartment complexes or even smaller strip retail centers, that takes into consideration non-payment of rents. Business goes out of business, things start to get rough on them, they get late on their rent, and it takes you a few months to sort of realize that they're going under, and then you got to start listing the space and get a new tenant in, and then you've lost some money from the fact that they're not going to pay you rent. All of that is calculated into that effective gross income number. Some properties, it doesn't matter at all. Some properties, it matters a lot. So you got to kind of know what type of property you're looking at when you're doing the calculations. Then net operating income takes your effective gross income and takes out all your operating expenses. And this is the real art of it all through here, because typical operating expenses can be taxes, insurance, utilities, maintenance, landscaping, cleaning, management, reserves. There's a ton of things that can go in that number. But if you have a CVS as your tenant and they're under a triple net lease and they pay the taxes, the insurance, the maintenance, all of the utilities, then that operating expense number for you is going to be really small, because it might just be management and a little bit of reserves for if something goes wrong. But if you have a building that has 20 different small offices in it, and they're renting it on a monthly basis, like $1,000 a month for each office space, chances are that's all they're paying is $1,000. They're not paying a portion of. So you, as the property owner, are paying the taxes, the insurance, the utilities, the cleaning. So again, understanding all of what's going into those numbers is important for getting to your net operating income. Does that make? I'm getting a good head shakes here, so that's a good sign. Okay, my clicker is not clicking forward, so let's see if I can.
If you click back on the actual screen.
Oh yeah, that was it. There we go. Okay, was that the right one? Okay. So here's the example that I promised you. Our $2 million property that we were talking about at the very beginning here with the 6% cap rate. We're going to pretend that it's a 10-unit apartment building with all one-bedroom apartments. And the 10 apartments are rented at $13, $15, $80 a month. I had to make it odd because I went from the net operating income up instead of the income down. So your potential gross income is $13, $15, $80 times 10 units times 12 months. So we got to the $157,895. Then I've put in here a vacancy and credit loss of 5%, but you're going to want to talk to your property owner and see, kind of what their vacancy number is. You might want to look at 3 years of their financial performance to say, it might be more like 3%, it might be more like 12%. Depends on how nice they are, or where they are. I mean, you guys are real estate agents. You know all the things that go into why things are more valuable or less valuable to people than others. So that takes us to an effective gross income of $150,000. Our operating expenses are $30,000, and that got us to our NOI that we used in our example of 120. Digging deeper into our operating expenses, though, as I said earlier, is sort of where you got to kind of put your thinking cap on a little bit. I've got the taxes at $8,000, insurance at $3,000, but your property owner has told you that they're paying $9,000 a month in utilities. So some quick math on my part got that to about $75 per month per apartment. So I think to myself, does that sound reasonable? Or power, water, sewer, whatever other utilities they might be providing, internet, cable. Does anybody have cable anymore? And then landscaping was given to us at $1,200, so that's about $100 a month, which seems kind of reasonable. I mean, I haven't really priced landscaping recently, so it might be on the low end, but you got to think that through the winter months, you're probably paying less. And then through the summer months, when bushes are being trimmed and grass is being mowed, you're probably paying more. Then the maintenance number that's provided was $4,300. And so my first guess at that is, It seems like that might be a little bit of a low number to me. You got to think that's like what, 3 faulty ovens, and you've spent that in a year. So, if I was to be given this statement, I may ask for a couple other years of actual expenses on the maintenance, or something to give me a little more comfort as to, maybe they have written in their leases that they only cover certain things. And the tenant has to cover other things, but, a couple of HVAC units or something like that going wrong, that maintenance number is going to be blown in a year. The management fee that was calculated in here is at 3%. The question I always ask myself is, would I do that job for that money? So would you deal with 10 renters for a year at a 3% rate? Probably not. That's probably a low number. That number probably needs to be closer to 10%. But now, if we weren't talking about this being at a 10-unit apartment building, if we were talking about this being a McDonald's, and all you had to do was get the check every month, and then once a year write them a little note that says, your lease is going up by 2%, start paying us this amount, that you might do for 3%. So again, think about what the tasks are for a manager for whatever property you're doing. And then this pro forma that we've gotten from our property owner didn't include any reserves. And your typical investor is going to think about that. Owners don't want to think about that because very few of them put money in reserve. And it makes the numbers look worse if you add that number in. It makes your cap rate look a little higher, and things like that. So, but you have to think about, you've got to paint a building, every 10 or 15 years. You've got to put a new roof on it every so many years. It could need fixing to its siding. The parking lot could need repaving, restriping. All of those things typically go more in a reserves type category than a maintenance type category, because they're considered like one-time large expenses versus everyday maintenance. You got to go fix a clogged sewer and a clogged pipe, and the light isn't working in this room, and things you're going to send your maintenance man guy out for. Looking back at our pro forma, our operating expenses number might be on the low end. And then again, it might not. Yep.
Forgive me if you said this, and this is assuming that the property is owned outright?
Yes.
Okay. And then for the reserves, do you have like a sliding scale? You have a number that you can say, okay, here's the building, here's the value, here's the units. You have like a reserving this percentage.
Yeah, if you Google, what's a typical reserve? A lot of times they'll do it on a per square foot basis. So it'd be like 40 cents a square foot or something like that. But a lot of times you can find, I'm amazed at the things that I could Google and I can get information about. It just sort of blows my mind. But it's going to be different per property type. For each property type. So there's not really you always use $1 per square foot, or you always use 50 cents a square foot. It's going to change depending on not only the property type, but also back to talking about that lease. If the tenant is paying for a lot of these things, then if the tenant is responsible for making sure the roof gets replaced or the HVAC system gets replaced, then you're not going to reserve for that, because that's their responsibility.
You see some of those things depending on the market, like everything's full, then that owners can get more out of, like that's.
Yeah, a little bit, but really it's property. If it's a single building, like sitting on its own footprint, a lot of times those tend to get pushed more towards triple net, where the tenant's paying all the expenses. When you have 5 tenants in a shopping center or 4 different offices in a building, that's when things tend to get more put on the building owner, and because it's a nightmare of calculation to figure out, okay, well, you have 32% of the space and this person has 18% of the space and this person has 24%. And then you got to charge the HVAC repair to all those different pieces. So it's not, I mean, I'm sure there is a little bit of it with the market, but a lot of it's more property type. Like the more tenants you have, the more likely you're going to have all of this stuff CAM build for the property. And CAM is common area maintenance. And doing those calculations can be a beast. I managed a 18 tenant shopping center in Hendersonville. Thank God it sold this year. But for 12 years, and every year I had to break out 18 different tenants' billings. And, you know, some people shared trash and some people had their own trash. You know, the grocery store, Tent Anchor, had its own trash, but the little inline units all shared trash, you know, bins out back. And there was music and only 8 of the tenants paid for the music. And I mean, I could go on, but I won't.
Laura, do you mind if we just take a minute?
Yeah.
We'll do our pause here.
Oh, yeah,
That's
perfect.
okay.
Yeah.
So yeah, sorry everyone on Zoom. We're just doing lunch a little bit late today, but I'd be remiss if we didn't give Austin a couple of minutes to talk about him and his business and allow people to get lunch who are here in person. So Austin, do you want to take a moment and you can come up here so you can speak into the Zoom? Thank you.
Thank you. I'm Austin Bowman with Affordable Inspections and Affordable Radon Solutions. First, my apologies. I assumed that lunch would be like it was the last time I did this, which was pre-COVID. It's good we had COVID because old people don't keep track of time very well. So it was like, oh, well, that was pre-COVID sometime, you know. But just to share a little bit about what we do, we've been serving Western North Carolina for 22 years. And I think as a company in inspections, we've inspected over about 30,000 homes, something like that, and installed about 4,000 mitigation systems. If we haven't figured it out by now, it's too late. That's the bottom line, you know. And the way I usually approach this type of presentation is kind of our basic philosophy of what we do and what we do with you guys. And we partner with you. You know, we're not adversaries. Every once in a while, we'll have a realtor, you know, and I'll call up and I go, "Hello, you ruined my deal." And I go, "Oh, okay, here we go." You know, and we're there to help people buy the right house for them. And that's what you all do too, you know. And we're kind of looking at it from a different point of view. Sometimes when we're booking an appointment or whatever, people will say, you know, well, how much do you think, you know, that this might cost or that might cost? And I just explained, we deal with everything except something that would have a dollar sign in front of it. That's what you guys do. Yeah. Or I tell them, you do the dirty work, we just crawl around under houses. But from that point of view, we do our best to serve our clients, you know, and we're We're available. We return phone calls. We try to, just work with basic healthy principles. We started the radon business about 18 years ago because after doing home inspections for 4 years, we saw so many lousy radon mitigation systems that were just slapped in, and sometimes they work, sometimes they don't. But we're also, I'm real happy to do presentations for different offices and companies, especially on radon, because with all due respect, you guys know what you're doing selling houses, but realtors tend to be a bit weak on what's going on with radon. And you should never, ever lose a deal over a radon situation. And even if you get people from, to pick a state, Florida, who don't know anything about it, and it's like, oh, we can get cancer living in this house. There's not been a house over those 18 years that we were not able to reduce the radon below 4, which is acceptable. But there's a lot of misunderstandings. I don't know if any of you did the I guess it was kind of a seminar with Philip Gibson from North Carolina State. He's really good and a real good educator. I know I talked to some realtors that were at that, and he did an education recently, and it's dispelling a lot of the preconceived ideas. So keep that in mind. Be happy to come by, do 15, 20 minutes, whatever. And the last minute, anybody have any questions? Okay, I know you're all hungry, so let's go do it. I've got pamphlets, business cards I'm going to leave out, and enjoy your lunch. And again, sorry it was late.
All right. Can you guys eat and listen, you think?
Oh, yeah, of course.
Does that work?
For sure.
All right. I won't make you talk with your mouth full. Okay. So I know this is the reason that most everybody comes to a class like this. Is where do you find cap rates? How do you figure out what to use? Where is this magic number that I'm going to be able to apply to my income to know how much I should price this property for? And of course, that's the huge challenge. And when you leave here, you'll have some more resources, but there's no easy way to do it. It takes a lot of research and a lot of digging in the market to figure it out. So, the first way is market extraction. You look for rates on properties of a similar type that have recently sold in your market. So if you know that you're doing a CVS and you can find regionally that, 3 of them have traded in the last 2 years and they've been both, at between 6 and 6.5% cap rates, then you feel pretty good about using that number. The caution that, that I'll give you and that other people say is about market extraction is that it can potentially get an investor caught in a bubble, because when rates are moving fast and a property type is hot, and you start to, when you start saying to yourself, I can't believe that sold for that. I can't believe that sold for that. I can't believe that sold for that. Then, if you were to use those extracted rates, you might be because lower rates, higher value. So you might be at a lower rate because of the movement of the market, and that might not be, it might be just caught up in the excitement of it, and it might not be like the true cap rate you should be looking for or using. Historical returns, and this one just assumes that past returns should represent current expectations. And for me, this is like, this is my range. So if I feel like office properties in general in the area are selling for between a 7 and 9% cap rate, then that's that's using that historical data. That's sort of where they've been selling for. Then the last place is investor surveys. Those can be paid services. Again, Googling it on the internet, a lot of times will get you some numbers from various either articles about the subject property. I was working on a mini storage a few months ago, probably 6 or 8 months ago, and the guy gave me his pro forma, and he did like a 5% cap rate, and I was like, "Ooh, that's aggressive." And so I thought, okay, I'm just what is the rate on mini storage, and it wasn't far off from like what Google was saying. Now, again, I can't just use Google. I've got to have an appraisal. I've got to have 3 different sources. I don't have to, but I like to have 3 different sources that are telling me what my cap rates are, so that I'm not looking at just, so I go and I pull actual transactions off of CoStar in the market for my property type. And then I pull some sort of a service that says, let's say it's an office property, what office property cap rates are or arranging. And then I use Realty Rates as my third source. That's a paid service, and it gives you rates for certain property types. And those are sort of my 3 things that I go to. The other good thing about investor surveys is that they do their data quarterly. So you can also look at your property type for the last 4 quarters, and you can get an idea of, are these rates going up or are these rates going down? We'll get to Realty Rates, and I'll tell you why I don't like them in a minute. I want to steal my last couple of slides. Generally speaking, cap rates are going to range between 4 and 15%. If you get below 4%, in my opinion, why would an investor make a real estate transaction when they can get that rate or better doing stocks and bonds? It's a little less risky, bonds, than having real estate to manage. There's a lot there, depending on the property, but there can be a lot to go along with owning real estate. And it's much easier to just invest in bonds or markets. Then rates above 15% generally are signaling to you that something's wrong. Not getting enough income. It's not there's something, either they haven't gone up on their rents with their tenants. There's a lot of deferred maintenance that you're going to have to go in and fix when you get there. In my mind, if you're seeing something really in this market above 12, you probably need to be increasing your due diligence as to what's going on with the property. I do see higher rates. Let's say a mobile home park, and it's a 10-unit mobile home park. The people have owned it for 20 years, and they know all their tenants. And they're like, well, Mary's such a hard worker. We don't want to increase her rent. And, Joe does some little yard work for us, so we don't want to do this. And they're still paying, $750 a month for their mobile home. They are below market. And most of those times when the people have owned it for so long, they don't have any debt on it. It's just extra pocket money for them. So they're like, well, we don't want to put these people out. We don't want to make it so they can't afford to live here. And so, those are some of those situations where kind of your actual cap rate might be on the higher end. And of course, an investor is going to see that and say, because they don't care about Mary and Joe, and they're going to come in, jack those rates, get all the people that can't afford it out of their units, and, raise that income and drop that rate down to something a little bit stronger. So, here's some audience participation. I know you're eating, but I already gave you a hint on one of the property types that has highest rates. What do you think for low rates? What kind of property types are going to have the lowest cap rates?
Drugstores are relatively low.
Drugstores are low.
Family dollars are not as good as they were, but they're up some. Self-storage is still good.
It is, especially in our area.
Office not as good as it used to be.
So self-storage in our area. Why do you think self-storage is good in our area?
Second, third homes.
A little bit, but we have a ton of apartments. And people who live in apartments have storage units. And they want a storage unit that's not too far from their apartment so they can go get whatever things that they really should have gotten rid of when they moved, but they didn't have the heart to. Sorry, that was how my storage unit story went. You pay for it for about a year and a half, and then you go in there to clean it out, and you think, why have I been paying this? Why didn't I just give all this to Salvation Army? So other low rates, ground leases tend to be low cap rates because they just don't have a lot. All those expenses that we were talking about, they go with net income calculations. You don't really have those when you're leasing ground because it's just a check coming to you. Fast food, McDonald's, Burger King, those kind of things. Anything that has a nationally traded tenant. So a person who the tenant is like on a stock exchange somewhere is going to have a lower cap rate as a tenant than, so you think, okay, of your McDonald's, and then you think of an area where McDonald's has failed, and that McDonald's is now a Mexican restaurant. The cap rates on those two things are two totally different numbers. I'm sorry, it's what it is. Every fast food restaurant you see that fails is a Mexican restaurant. It's just crazy. And they're all successful in general. I go to them. But okay, and so higher rates, I already gave you mobile home parks tend to be on the higher side. Any other ones that you can think, huh?
What are you seeing, 15, 18?
No, not that much. No, I'm there, 9 to 13, probably.
Smaller.
What about self-storage? What are the rates on those?
Self-storage are pretty low, especially in our area.
Like 49 or something like
Yeah, probably more like 5 to 7.
that? Wow.
And now, again, if it's just one of those like 10 units in a gravel lot next to somebody's house, that's going to be, that could be up at 9%. But if it's a real like self-storage that has floors and maybe has one building that's got some climate control and some buildings that aren't, those are going to be on the lower side. In our area, as you guys probably all know, office has been hit pretty hard nationwide. And big cities are really struggling with office. We haven't seen it as bad here in Asheville. I would say it's on the higher end of our regular sort of numbers for Asheville. But I haven't really seen it go crazy, but nationally, office is up there. Malls were struggling for a while there, but now they seem to be doing a little bit of a comeback. Trying to think of other sort of higher things. Yeah, I mean, mobile home parks are the one thing that probably, typically stays high in our area. But also that's because we have more mom and pop mobile home parks around here than you don't see sort of like the big ones with like an office out front and an on property manager all the time and things like that. Okay. This I tried to make cute, and I hope you can read it. But it sort of goes through our $2 million property, and it just sort of gives you some examples. So that's saying you get to $2 million. So if you use a 5% cap rate, if you've got 100,000 in income, you're going to get to a $2 million value. So I put into there just that might be a ground lease, or I was going to say a McDonald's, but there's way more than 100,000 income off of that. So I wanted it to be reasonable. Our second, that kind of pale blue one, that's our 120,000 of income at our 6% rate. So that's our apartment building example. If you had $140,000 and a 7% rate, you're still getting to 2 million as your value. So that's probably a small local retail building, not a national, not like I said, not a national tenant, but a tenant that's regional or something like that. So 160,000 at 8% gives us the 2 million. I threw in there a small industrial building. Like bigger industrial is going to be on the lower end, but like the smaller, under 10,000 square feet might be in there. Then I was kind of mean to the office building, but I did 180 for, we give you 2 million, and then 200,000 income is going to be our mobile home park at a 10% cap rate. So I was just kind of giving you, the income and the rate all come to the same value, but they're all different things and different cap rates to get to that number.
I'm sorry, so, and we're talking about the NOI.
Yeah, the net operating income after all your expenses are out. And one thing I wanted to sort of make a point of is like interest carry, depreciation, amortization, those are not operating expenses. So just make sure that none of those numbers sneak in there. So I already talked about kind of what I do. I do a lot of CoStar. And I don't know if anyone in here uses CoStar. Super expensive. Not sure it's worth it, but it's the biggest game in town. So until somebody can come take it away from them. But it allows you through your search parameters to put in, like, let's say I can put in, I'm looking for multifamily housing, and I can say, I want every sale that's sold with a cap rate more than 1. And it's going to give me every published cap rate that the agent put on a closed sale. So that allows me to get that data for that particular market type and use it. Also, I can then go into like even further detail and look at specific transactions to sort of figure that out. Our MLS, some people do put cap rates on there. I wish there was a way we could like tease that number out a little bit better. But I do see cap rates sometimes on there, so I use those. As I said, I use realty rates. My big problem for telling you guys that it's like a good idea for you is it's a national service. So it's using everything from New York to San Francisco to Asheville to whatever. And so a lot of times I find it to be higher than where our market is. Like my market data, I just did a car dealership. My market data said that the cap rate should be between 6.4% and 7%. And then when I pulled it off of realty rates, I think their average was like 8.5. I put that data in my reports because they have a range and an average, but I think, great for appraiser use, not so great for what I would be doing here. And then other sources for getting cap rates. You've got PricewaterhouseCooper. They do a survey. You can pay for it. I tried to find online what the price was. Couldn't do it. CBRE also does surveys in local areas. There's a place called Green Street Service that does it. There's a service kind of like Realty Rates called National Cap Rates. I was able to find their pricing, 175 annually, 225 for the entire US. Again, that's going to be national numbers. In my research for this class, I found this, it's called Cap Rate Index. And it gives you 3 months for $19.99, which is pretty much a bargain. And it drills down not only to the city of Asheville, but to the zip code. And it has office, industrial, multifamily. It has like 6 different categories, so you can get kind of by your property type. If any of you want to follow up with me when I put my address in about 3 months, I'm going to pay the $19.99 and see if it's worth using. Because as I was looking at their stuff online, I was like, this might be interesting. And they give you like an overall rate for the market, and then they break it down into those different sectors. And the overall rate for the market that I could see online was not bad. Like, it was kind of reasonable in my mind for what Asheville's doing. So I was like, I might dig into that a little further. And then you have Standard & Poor's, JP Morgan. What was the one you had, Trudy? Vista?
Yeah, that isn't Amazon run, and then it's another one that I use some, but I like CoStar. And the way I do it, though, it's cheaper for me to pay somebody like you.
Yeah.
Appraisal.
Yeah. Yes, it is much cheaper.
Expensive.
Much cheaper.
It used to be reasonable. It's not.
CoStar used to be pretty affordable.
I know.
And I think it's now, I don't know, it's 12,000, 13,000 a year. It's ridiculous. But yeah, if you do have a particular thing and you need to know rates and you want me to run a CoStar search for it, give me a call. I'll run it up and let you, let you know what data I find on it. My other complaint about CoStar is like garbage in, garbage out. Like, sometimes, because they hire analysts to get this data and to call on it. And, if you get the analyst on his first month working, he's not getting, he hadn't figured out what he's doing with his job yet. But if you get him after, 6 or 8 months working, the data that they're putting in is a little bit better. But they don't ever go back and fix the stuff they did at the beginning, and they turn over analysts like crazy. And I had, as an aside, I had said to them, like, why don't you give me a reduced fee? And when I find mistakes, I'll send them to you and you can make your data better. And they were like, why don't you just send us the mistakes and pay the full fee? And I was like, not happening. So, and I think that's the end of it. So there's my contact information. If y'all want it, I also have cards somewhere that I'll be happy to hand out if you really want them. As we may talk about at the beginning, I work for the DOT by day. I'm a staff review appraiser, reviewing appraisals of projects that are going on in divisions 13 and 14, which basically is Morganton to Murphy. And then I have my own appraisal business that I do commercial appraisals at night. I have 2 trainees working with me, and yeah, I keep busy. Thank goodness we sold the shopping center and I don't do that anymore. But I'm happy to answer any questions you have now. I'm happy for you to call me later to talk one-on-one with questions. If you get a particular property type that you want to ask me about, or you want more details on, please feel free to call me. I love I love teaching and talking about appraisals and about all of this kind of stuff. So I'm happy to do it. So use me as as an option if you just have something that you want to talk about or ask about. But any other questions on this? I mean, there's full on classes that are week long on the income approach for doing things. So this 30 minutes or maybe 40 minutes, probably didn't even scratch the surface, but hopefully gave y'all a little bit of basic working knowledge.
Why is this so brain twisting? This topic. This is like why, I consider myself to be fairly, confident person. I said confident. I'm like,
I think the reason it's so complicated is because real estate is so complicated. If everyone's lease was standard, God, wouldn't that be easy? But nobody's lease is standard, and they all have, you have to, I read 16, 18-page leases all the time because, of course, the information I need about these operating expenses is buried on page 7 somewhere. And, and by property type, and then, of course, the market's always changing. I was actually telling David as I walked in, I stopped saying that Asheville couldn't have any more apartments about 4 years ago. Because they just keep coming. And so, the market moves, the market changes, and you just kind of have to sort of keep your finger in a bunch of pies to try to figure out what's going on with all these different sectors. So I mean, if it was like a formula that you could plug stuff in and it would be easy and you could get, the data out of it. But you have to think, and you have to, when a person gives you the expenses for the apartment and they say utilities are only $3,000, you have to go, wait a minute, because if I break that up per apartment per month, that's like $15 a month. There's no way you're getting power, water, blah 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 for that little.
I'm sure you've never run into this, but there's something called deception.
Yeah.
Where there are people with multiple facilities,
Mm-hmm.
and they'll move some expenses if they think about selling this one in 2 years over to that facility. Their tax returns look good, and then you find out they're not reporting everything. It really is.
You really have to think. I mean, you can't just, you have to break it down. Like, okay, I've got to break this down on a monthly basis because and like going through life, you learn how much a new roof costs, how much how much your HVAC costs, how much your water heater costs, so how much you pay for your power bill, how much you pay for your water bill. So you can start thinking, okay, well, if I'm paying this much, does it make sense that this company or business is paying this much? So you have, like I said, you have to kind of think. And thinking's hard. I don't like doing it. Yeah. And the other deception thing is, I've done, so I was a banker, as we talked about, for like 18 years, and I would do a loan for, let's say, a smaller hotel motel, and the person would say, do you want our tax returns or do you want our books?
Right.
I want the truth. What I want. I mean, which one is telling me the truth? So when anybody says that to you, radar should go up. You should all of a sudden start being like, oh, we might want to back off on this a little bit. All right. Any questions?
Thank you so much.
Okay. Thank you.